Ready.
Hello, Nevis. How are
Hello,
you
Miss
today?
Lexi. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, just a little chilly, but otherwise perfect. So, we have a book here, and it's called My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Mur. And I started reading it the other day with Alan, and today I'm going to continue reading it with you. So
Perfect.
if you would like to read what it says on the screen, which gives a general idea of what happened in the last chapters we did.
Perfect. My cousin Rachel is the relationship of the young English Philip and Rachel, the widow of Philip's cousin Ambrose. While Philip was innocent, Rachel had a worldly persona who might have murdered her husband. Philip is drawn to Rachel, yet he is haunted by suspicions about her and thinks she needs to be saved from herself. The events of the novel have already transpired and Philip is musing over Rachel, fate and trying to deal with his own guilt. He begins the story of Rachel by telling the reader that after the death of his parents, his cousin Ambrose raised him, and that he was raised without woman in his life, as Ambrose did not trust them.
Right. So I mentioned to Alan the other day when we were reading that Rachel sounds like the fly in the ointment. So if you can imagine a cream and there's a fly in it, so it like bothers you, you're not quite sure. And not a lot has transpired since we've read the first two chapters, but this is a graded reader, so they don't tell you everything. If you watch the film, you will see more details, but it's quite interesting, even though it's a graded reader. So we're going to start. I will start, and then you can continue in the next part.
Perfect.
Okay. So here we go. The Villa Sanghetti. I had a terrible journey. The roads were noisy and dirty. The weather got hotter every day. By the time I reached Florence, it was the 15th of August. So Philip has an uncle called Ambrose. And like in the 18th century, people used to go abroad to Europe in the winter so that they didn't feel ill. Yes. And Ambrose has gone abroad to Italy. And he's written a letter saying, please, Philip, come and see me. I don't feel very well. So this is where we pick up the story. I found a room in a hotel and washed and changed my clothes. When I went out again, the streets were full of people. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon and still very hot. I stopped a carriage. I always find it hard to say names of words. I don't ever know why. Villa Sanghetti. I said to the driver. He nodded and pointed up the hill. The horse pulled the carriage slowly up a long, twisting road. At last the driver stopped in front of a gate in a high wall. I made signs to him to wait. There was a bell outside the gate, and I pulled it hard. I waited a few moments, but no one came. I rang the bell again. I heard the sound of dogs barking and a child crying. It was very hot. Then I heard footsteps and the gate slowly opened. A servant woman stood in the gateway. There was a long, wide path behind her. It led to the villa. Villa Sanghetti, Signor Ashley? I asked. Now, the only word here that I think people might not realize what it is twisting when it goes like that, the road. Okay, so you could imagine the road being like this because it's going up a hill. They don't normally go straight up the hill, no?
The woman tried to shut the gate, but I pushed it past her. A man appeared and the woman shouted to him in Italian. I heard the words, Ashley, English. The man stared at me. I speak a little English, senor, he said. Can I help you? I have come here to see Mr. Ashley. I say, are Mr. and Miss Ashley at the villa? The man looked worried. Are you Signor Ashley's son, Signor? He asked. No, I said, I'm his cousin. Tell me quickly, is he at home? You are from England, Signor? The man asked slowly. You have not heard the news? Signor Ashley, he died 3 weeks ago, very suddenly. After the funeral, the Contessa, his wife, shut up the villa and went away. We don't know if she will come back again.
So you can see the surprise on Philip if he arrives in Italy. Now, in the 18th century, it would take about a month to travel to Italy. It's not like now. And the big shock of arriving and finding your cousin. I said before uncle, but it's his cousin, elderly cousin. And he's died. So he wasn't expecting this news. So it must have been a shock to him. I did not say anything. There was nothing I could say. Signor, the man said kindly, I will open the villa for you. You can see where Signor Ashley died. I was not interested where I went or what I did. The man began to walk up the path, taking some keys from his pocket. I followed. So I maybe have been in a bit of a daze, no? Not knowing what his body was doing, his mind, because of the shock, no? The villa was very beautiful. All the windows were closed and shuttered. The man opened the big door. He and the woman began to open the shutters. The rooms were large and the air was dry and dusty. So before going on any further, shutters, if you can imagine a window, and on the outside you have these wooden shutters that open and close. Yes, it's to keep out the sun in Mediterranean countries. So normally they're made of wood. But now we would call something called blinds, which we pull down. And maybe we have them more than actual shutters. Okay. The Villa Sanghetti is beautiful, Signor. Very old, said the man. The Signor Ashley, this is where he sat. This was his chair. I looked at the chair. I could not think of Ambrose in this house, in this room. I went to the window. Outside, there was a little courtyard. It was open to the sky, but shaded from the sun. In the middle of the courtyard, there was a fountain and a little pool. A laudrum tree stood beside the pool. Its golden flowers had died, and its small green seed lay on the ground. So this word here, the courtyard, is it's a piece like what we may call now cement, no, outside, and maybe all the windows of the house look onto the courtyard. And this is where maybe centuries ago people would meet maybe and talk. So this is why it's called the courtyard.
Signor Ashley, he sat here every day, the man said. He liked to listen to the water falling. He sat there under the tree. In summer, they always sat here, Signor Ashley and the Contessa. They drank their tisana here after dinner, day after day, always the same. It was very cold there in the courtyard and very, very quiet. I thought of how Ambrose have lived at home, walking, riding, always cheerful and busy. I will show you the room where Signor Ashley died, the man said quietly. I followed him upstairs into the plain, bare room.
So here, bare room means there's nothing inside the room, right? And I'm imagining that tisane should be something like a tea, maybe, that they had in the afternoon. I'm not sure, but I'm just guessing. And here in the picture, we can see both of them looking out of the window to the courtyard. I looked at the small, hard bed where Ambrose had died. He died suddenly, the man told me. He was very weak from the fever, but sometimes he shouted like a madman. Then one morning the Contessa called for me. He was lying very still. It was the sleep of death. He had a peaceful face. The pain and the madness had all gone. Madness? What do you mean? I said. The madness of the fever, the man replied. He suffered much pain. Sometimes I had to hold him down in his bed. Then came the fever and the madness. I tell you, Senor, it was terrible to see. I turned away. So also we have to remember the circumstances. Philip hasn't had a lot of experience with life. He just knows the house at home back in England, his cousin, and the people in the village. So it must be a shock on all different levels, no?
Why was nothing done? I say. Why did Miss Astley let him die? What was this illness? How long did it last? At the end, it was very sudden, like I told you, said the man. But he had been very ill all winter, and he was sad. All winter he was sad. He walked through another room and out onto a long terrace. In front of us were the most beautiful gardens I had ever seen. I think, the man said slowly, that the Contessa will not come back again. Too sad for her. Signor Rinaldi told us that perhaps the villa will be sold. Who is Signor Rinaldi? I asked quickly. He arranged things for the Contessa, the man replied. Money, business, everything. I give you his address. He speaks English very well. He closed the shutters. We walked downstairs again and stood by the big door. What happened to his clothes? I asked. Where are his books, his papers? The Contessa took everything with her. And you don't know where she went? I asked. The man shook his head.
She has left Florence. That is all I know, Senor. Ashley was buried here in Florence, Senor. Then the Contessa left. The woman suddenly spoke to her husband and opened a chest near the wall. She came back carrying a big straw hat, Ambrose's hat. That hat he had sometimes wore at home in the sun. The woman gave it to me, and I stood there with it in my hands. Take it with you, Senor, the man said softly. It's yours now. Can you imagine, and to someone who is very close to you, you have one object left to remember them, a straw hat. So, as it says here, are we ready for the next chapter? Off you go.
On my journey back to Florence, I thought of only one thing. I had to speak to Signor Rinaldi. He must know more about Ambrose's death. The servant at the villa had given me Signor Rinaldi's address. I found the house at last, in a quiet, dark street. Signor Rinaldi was at home and a servant took me to his room. Rinaldi looked surprised when he saw me. He was a thin man, about 40 years old, with a proud, hard face. My name is Astley, Philip Astley, I said. Yes, Signor Rinaldi answered. Will you sit down? You're Ambrose Astley's cousin, and his hair. You look very like him. I did not expect to see you here. When did you arrive in Florence? This afternoon, I replied. I have been to the Villa Sanghitelli. Signor Rinaldi smiled. Then you have not seen your cousin Rachel, he said. She left from Florence very suddenly. Your cousin's death was a great shock to her.
So in the other chapters, we have spoke about this word, air. And it sounds like the air we breathe, but it means the person who is entitled to the dead person's belongings, the heir. So we talked about that in another chapter. It was a shock to me, Signor Rinaldi, I said. Why wasn't I told about Ambrose's illness? Mrs. Ashley always hoped he would get better, Rinaldi answered. She did not want to worry you. But I had these letters, I said. That is why I came to Florence, and I handed Rinaldi the 2 letters from Ambrose. When he had read them, Signor Rinaldi said slowly, yes, the doctors warned Mrs. Ashley of this. What do you mean? They told her that your cousin had a tumour on his brain. That is why he wrote these letters. First, the tumour destroyed his brain, then it killed him. I shook my head. I couldn't believe it. Rinaldi held out a paper. This is a copy of the death certificate, he said. I sent another copy of it to you in Cornwall and one to Mr. Kendall as your guardian. He had to be told about Ambrose's death.
Mr. Kendall is my guardian? I asked in surprise. Ambrose never told me that. It is in your cousin's will, Reynaldo replied. Mr. Kendall will explain when you return home. But what about these letters? I cried. Ambrose wrote them to warn me. He was not sick, but in great danger. Your cousin Ambrose was sick in his mind, Rinaldi answered. His sickness gave him strange ideas because Miss Ashley was with him all the time. He suspected her. A sick man often thinks that his dearest friends are his enemies.
Right. Also, in another chapter, we explained about will. Will is a piece of paper or a document where people normally write while they're still living, of course, saying exactly what they want to happen to their house, their belongings. And then, so when they die, there are no misunderstandings and everything is legally done. I will. So it's not like the future. I will go home. One is a helping verb, will, which tells us it's the future. I will go home. So because of the position of the word and the other combination of the group of words together, we realize that it's a helping verb. But here we realize it's a noun. So we know we have to think of something else. And in this case, it is a piece of paper, a document. Also, there is something else called willpower. Willpower is when you have the strength to do something. For example, I don't have a lot of willpower to get up early in the morning. So as we know, one word can have lots of possibilities. So here we go. If I had been here, Ambrose would be alive now, I said. Rinaldi shook his head. No, he said, that's not true. No one could do anything for him. I turned and moved towards the door. When Mrs. Ashley returns, tell her I know about the letters, I said. Your cousin Rachel left Florence very suddenly, Rinaldi said. I don't think she will come back. I walked out of the cold house and into the dark streets. I did not believe Rinaldi's story. Ambrose had died in great pain and unhappiness, and my cousin Rachel had been the cause of his pain. I was sure of that. I promised myself that one day I would bring pain and unhappiness to my cousin Rachel. I would punish this woman who had killed my dear Ambrose, far away from his home and his friends. Now, this last paragraph we must remember throughout the story because it has reference to things that will happen in the future. Okay, so listen, he's very angry now. He's very upset and he doesn't like his cousin Rachel at all. We must remember that. So that ended so quickly.
That was very short.
Yeah, very short. Short but sweet. So, have you enjoyed reading that? Even
Yes.
though you haven't seen the other part. So, as you can see, there's a lot of intrigue. And it should be interesting to get to the end to see what happens with cousin Rachel and Philip. So, Nieves will say goodbye for now, and we will continue the story another day. Okay, then.
Okay.
See you.
Bye bye. See you later.
Bye.